Welcome to Timeless Sparks, your portal to glimpses of the past that illuminate the world we live in today. Today, let's embark on a journey through one of history's most transformative, contentious, and impactful chapters, the Age of Empires and Colonialism. As we retrace these global tides of exploration, expansion, and resistance, we'll uncover how this era molded nations, shaped identities, and left a lasting legacy that reverberates through politics, culture, and society today. Imagine it's the late 15th century. The age of exploration is in full swing, sparked by an insatiable curiosity for the unknown and the desire for new trade routes to the riches of Asia. European seafarers, backed by burgeoning nations like Spain, Portugal, and later England, France, and the Netherlands, set sail across uncharted waters. What began as a search for spices, silks, and gold became something far greater, an opportunity to conquer and reshape the world. The expansion of European empires was driven by more than just commerce. There was pride, an often misguided belief in cultural superiority, and greed, fueled by mercantilism, an economic theory that saw colonies as the ultimate source of wealth and power for mother nations. Armed with advances in navigation and military technology, nations like Spain and Portugal carved out vast colonial territories in the Americas, rapidly overshadowing indigenous civilizations such as the Aztec and Inca empires. By the 17th century, the race for control extended to Africa and Asia, as the colonial powers sought to exploit labor, land, and resources for their empires. These ventures were often brutal, transforming landscapes and societies alike. And what justification did they offer for this domination? Religion. Claiming to spread Christianity and civilize so-called heathen lands, Europe's empires draped systems of exploitation in a thin veil of moral superiority, often ignoring or deliberately destroying rich, pre-existing spiritual traditions. But behind that curtain lay brutal oppression, enslavement of both indigenous peoples and forcibly transported Africans, and an unrelenting extraction of resources that funneled wealth back to Europe, leaving devastation in its wake. Fast forward to the late 19th century, and the world witnesses one of colonialism's most aggressive chapters, the scramble for Africa, a period of intense competition among European powers. The Berlin Conference of 1884-85 convened European leaders who, with little to no African representation, proceeded to carve up the continent, paying scant regard for the intricate tapestry of cultures, languages, and existing political entities. Borders, artificial lines on a map, were drawn hastily, often with ruler straightness, splitting ancient cultures and communities, lumping together rival groups, thereby sowing seeds for future conflict, all under new colonial territories overseen by distant European powers. Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, and Italy all claimed vast portions of Africa, establishing deeply exploitative systems designed to mine precious resources, grow cash crops for European markets, and solidify their global dominance. King Leopold II's Congo Free State stands as a horrific example of this brutality. Forced labor was widespread and systemic. Taxation was crushingly high, and any local resistance, whether organized or spontaneous, was often met with unspeakable violence and collective punishment, all to maintain imperial control. Meanwhile, as the European empires consolidated their brutal power in Africa, their insatiable reach into Asia followed a similar, though sometimes distinct, trajectory of domination and exploitation. India, often described as the jewel in Britain's imperial crown, was brought fully under direct colonial rule in 1858 after the major rebellion against the East India Company's dominance. So-called improvements like railroads, telegraphs, schools, and postal systems were introduced, not primarily to empower India's citizens, but to bolster colonial administration, facilitate resource extraction, and deepen imperial control. In Southeast Asia, France seized control of Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, forming French Indochina. The Dutch tightened their lucrative and long-held rule over the vast Indonesian archipelago, while Britain gained Burma, Malaya, and strategic ports like Singapore. Even mighty China, with its long history of imperial power, could not fully evade corrosive colonial interference. After two devastating defeats in the Opium Wars during the mid-19th century, China was forced into a series of harsh, unequal treaties, compelling it to cede territory like Hong Kong, open numerous ports to foreign trade and residents, and grant extensive extraterritorial rights to foreigners. Yet, in both Africa and Asia, colonial domination came at an immense cost. For the empires, the expense of maintaining control, administering vast territories, and suppressing dissent was substantial, even when resources were plentiful and cheap or forced labor abundant. And for the colonized, these systems of exploitation systematically eroded centuries-old traditions, disrupted spiritual practices, undermined local economies, and destroyed political independence. The changes weren't simply physical or political. They cut deeply into the soul of these societies, fracturing communities, rewriting histories, and leaving profound intergenerational scars that persist in myriad forms even today. If colonial powers believed their rule would remain unchallenged indefinitely, history would prove them profoundly mistaken. The colonized peoples were never merely passive victims. They were always agents of their own history. From the very early days of occupation, uprisings, both large and small, broke out repeatedly. The Haitian Revolution, culminating in 1804, was one of the earliest and most dramatic examples of a successfully freed colony, as the enslaved people of Saint-Domingue overthrew French rule and established Haiti, the first Black Republic and a beacon of hope for oppressed people everywhere. Resistance, however, almost invariably came at a daunting price. Rebellions, such as the Maji Uprising in German East Africa or the Boxer Rebellion in China, were often suppressed with overwhelming and brutal military force, leaving bloody trails and deep trauma across the landscapes of Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Yet, in every corner of these colonized continents, the seeds of nationalism, once sown, began to sprout, nurtured by shared grievances and a growing desire for self-determination. By the early 20th century, a new generation of intellectuals, spiritual leaders, labor organizers, and revolutionaries joined hands, articulating powerful visions of independent futures for their people. In India, Mahatma Gandhi emerged as a transformative leader, championing satyagraha, a philosophy of non-violent civil disobedience in the long struggle for sovereignty. His methods and message resonated globally, inspiring admiration and emulation. In the streets and villages of the Gold Coast, later Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah and his Convention People's Party rallied unwavering popular support for independence, with powerful cries of self-government now echoing across the African continent, igniting further movements. From Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh, who combined nationalism with communist ideology to fight French and later American intervention, to Kenya's Jomo Kenyatta, who became a symbol of the Mau Mau uprising and the quest for land and freedom. Diverse resistance leaders spoke with unwavering conviction, fanned the flames of national unity, and relentlessly challenged the once unchallenged might of the imperial powers. The unprecedented global devastation of World War II proved to be another critical turning point. European colonial powers, though among the victors, were severely weakened economically and politically by the costs of war. Their moral authority was also deeply compromised, especially as they had fought against Axis tyranny in the name of freedom and self-determination, a rhetoric that resonated powerfully in their own colonies. The newly formed United Nations, with its charter proclaiming the principle of self-determination for all peoples, became an important forum for anti-colonial voices. International public opinion, particularly in the United States and the Soviet Union, increasingly turned against the old imperial systems, and protests against colonial exploitation grew louder and more organized worldwide. By the mid-20th century, the global tide had turned definitively against colonialism. One by one, often after protracted struggles, colonies across Asia and Africa declared or were granted independence. Borders were redrawn, new nations emerged onto the world stage, and the winds of change, long resisted, gathered unstoppable strength, fundamentally reshaping the geopolitical map. But independence, though a monumental achievement, was not always peaceful, nor was it a panacea for all ills. As Europe's empires reluctantly departed, they often left behind deeply fractured societies and a host of unresolved problems. Artificial borders, drawn by colonial administrators with little concern for ethnic or geographical realities, frequently created persistent internal divisions and international disputes that fueled political instability for decades. Economies that had been structured primarily to serve colonial export needs now struggled to diversify and achieve self-sufficiency, and the deep echoes of exploitation lingered in unequal systems of governance, land ownership, and social stratification. The age of empires and colonialism was not just a detached chapter in old history books. It was a profound story of upheaval, encounter, and enduring transformation. Entire worlds collided, sometimes violently, sometimes gradually. Languages mingled, creating new creoles and lingua francas, and cultures interwove, sometimes harmoniously, often under duress, to create the rich, complex mosaic of human civilization as we see it today. But this mixing, this creation of a globalized world, frequently came at a terrible cost. It often involved the systematic bulldozing of indigenous knowledge systems, the suppression or eradication of local traditions and languages, the violent oppression of local populations unwilling to submit, and the fundamental reshaping of entire societies primarily for the economic and political benefit of distant global imperial powers. Where do we see colonialism's indelible legacy today, often hidden in plain sight? We see it in the political borders that still define many nations, yet often follow no natural geographical or ethnic logic, leading to ongoing tensions. We see it in the persistent and glaring disparities of wealth, health, and opportunity between many nations of the global north, often former colonizers, and those in the global south, often former colonies. We see it in the ongoing struggles for fundamental human rights, for dignity, and for restorative justice among communities whose ancestors were dispossessed, subjugated, and exploited for centuries under colonial rule. And we see it in the shared language and spirit of resistance, a legacy passed down from the anti-colonial freedom fighters and the chants at independence rallies decades ago, to the global fight for racial justice, economic equality, and planetary survival that continues with vigor today. To truly understand the complex, interconnected world we inhabit, we must first be willing to confront all of its pasts, especially those chapters that are uncomfortable or challenging. The age of empires and colonialism was neither purely evil in all its actors, nor wholly noble in any of its enterprises. It was and remains a profoundly complex tapestry of human ambition, scientific curiosity, economic greed, systemic cruelty, individual courage, and collective resilience. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time here on Timeless Sparks. We hope this exploration of the age of empires and colonialism has offered some valuable perspectives. If today's story helped you gain a clearer perspective of our history or sparked further questions, please consider liking this video, sharing it with your community, and subscribing to our channel to stay connected for more deep dives into the past. Don't miss our future episodes as we continue to uncover more sparks that shaped our world, aiming to understand how yesterday informs today. Until next time, stay curious and keep learning.